Are you curious about the latest rental trends in the Des Moines Metro? Whether you're a renter, a landlord, or an investor, this video is going to break down what's happening in our local rental market and what you need to know going into 2026. So, before we can dive so deep into the rental side of things, let's understand what Des Moines Metro actually involves and where it's headed. Over the last 4 years, the Des Moines Metro has seen a 6.4% increase in population. Now, with Metro, I mean Des Moines, all their surrounding suburbs, not just Des Moines. Inner city Des Moines has actually seen a slight decline in population, but it's been offset by the rapid growth, primarily of the Waukee and Ankeny areas. So, to put this population growth into perspective for you, the current Des Moines Metro has roughly 710,000 people in it. Now, the projections go out a long ways. By long ways, I mean clear to 2050. So 25 years from now, Des Moines is estimated to reach a total population of 1 million people. Now, to take that into just sheer numbers, if we're at 710,000 currently, and we're going clear to 1 million, that means we are adding roughly 40% more to our population than what we currently have within the next 25 years. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is actually driving the growth of the Des Moines Metro? And the statistics are pointing to the job growth, the affordability of just housing overall. What this allows things to do is we're very heavy in the tech sector, the financial sector, as well as logistics. So it's allowing people from all over, but primarily a younger generation, to move here for these jobs that they went to schooling for. And with the affordability of housing, it is allowing people to actually start fresh, if you would, at a much lower entry point than potentially where they're going to find elsewhere in the country. One of the other interesting statistics is that we actually have a higher birth rate than we do death rates currently in the state of Iowa, which means not only do we have outside population moving in, but the organic or natural population increase is also taking effect here in the Des Moines Metro. So jumping into really what the rental market looks like. The rental market as a whole, or as a large picture, I guess I should say, has been a very, we'll say, solid rental market. Here recently, there has been kind of I'm not going to say an overabundance of supply, but within the last 2 years, there's been almost 10% growth in the multifamily sector from the cities, more or less driving some focus into affordable housing, coming from the multi-units or apartment buildings. But I want to dive into what average rent actually looks like here in the Metro. And average rent, this is going to be based off of a one bedroom. Average rent is going to be about $983 a month. Now, what does that mean? Well, that breaks down to the sheer purpose of $983 a month gets you a true one bedroom. I'm not talking studio. I'm not talking renting somebody's basement out. I'm talking a true one bedroom, one bathroom apartment. And when you compare this to the national average, Des Moines is averaging roughly 20% less expensive than the rest of the nation as a whole for that same varied unit. Now, you might be saying, hey, Justin, I don't really care about a one-bedroom apartment. I'm trying to move my family to the Des Moines area, and I at least need 2 bedrooms to get started with. What do those rental numbers look like? Well, you're in luck. I got that number for you as well. On average across the Metro, and this number was taken from apartments.com, a 2-bedroom, 1 bath is going to average you about $1,091 a month. Now, it didn't break down if this includes a bulk of utilities, any utilities, or if this is you, the renter or tenant, paying all the utilities at once. But what it does significantly say is you can effectively rent a 2-bedroom unit here in the Metro cheaper than what you're going to be able to rent a single bedroom unit almost anywhere else in the entire country. Now, when I say anywhere else, I mean anywhere else that's going to have a metro or metropolitan hustle and bustle type of area. Now, you might be saying, hey, Justin, you mentioned the entire metro. You mentioned that Ankeny and Waukee are your two fastest growing locations across the metro. I like the numbers of what's going into Des Moines as a whole on what the average rent is. But what's the average rent in the fastest growing areas in your metro? Well, that isn't quite as inexpensive as it is in Des Moines as itself. But Ankeny and Waukee, for the same 2-bedroom unit, you're looking between $1,275 and $1,460, depending on the amenities, location, how new the building is, so on and so forth. Now, what are some of, we'll say, tips or potentially pitfalls that tenants run into with trying to rent here in the metro? And some of the challenges really come back to still low inventory. So even though the metro has increased their housing by roughly 10% over the last 2 years, now when I say housing, I mean apartment buildings. I don't mean single family. I don't mean private landlords. I mean commercialized rentals, right? So a 10% increase is pretty healthy in a 2-year time frame. And what that's also done is it's given Des Moines a larger than normal occupancy, or I should say vacancy rate. And the current vacancy rate in Des Moines is going to be about 6.3%, which doesn't seem that high, but most of the time from an investor standpoint, like myself, or a landlord, if you would, you're going to be wanting for a 5% or less vacancy rate. So even though that's a minimal number, what it is allowing is it is allowing a little bit of flexibility currently with inside the prices of what these units are renting for. So that's a good thing for the tenant, right? Now, what are maybe some of the downfalls? Well, the downfall is obviously, even though we've got the growth, you can only build in certain locations. And with that being said, desirability. So your more desirable units, those are going to be the first ones to go within a complex, single family home, whatever the case may be. But the most desirable units are going to be the ones that tend to move off the shelf quickly. And then you, as the potential tenant, is left with the units that aren't as desirable, whether it's based on location, amenities. I mean, so many things go into play here. And it will come down to what you are looking for within your next unit. One of the other ones that I think stands out pretty heavily is the credit requirements to rent here in the Des Moines Metro. I know personally, I see a lot of landlords downright requiring somewhere between a 620 and a 640 credit score. Now, what does that mean to you as a tenant? Really, that's putting you in a position that if the numbers made sense, and they're not always going to make sense, so I get that, but if the numbers made sense, you're in a position that you have the opportunity to either buy as a first-time home buyer, or you can stay in the rental market. Now, owning a home is not for everybody, and that's not what this video is about. So means that you've got to have, for the bulk of the apartments here in the Des Moines Metro, a credit score that's 620 or above. Just know for yourself that that does allow you to potentially purchase, depending on other factors. Now, flipping gears and switching more towards the investor side, what makes the Des Moines Metro such a great place to invest? I love some of the statistics that I found on this, mainly because I'm also an investor here in the Des Moines Metro. But I wanted to discuss what really catches an investor's eye. And it's some of the things that we've already talked on. It's going to be lower vacancy rates, which means steady returns on your money. The population growth, I mean, that's something we talked about. So that's keeping supply and demand within check. Potentially supply's lower than what demand is. I'm going to tell you a bulk of the time, as long as you do have a quality unit. So the rental demand is very high. But on the flip side of that, there's also some challenges. And I would say being local, being familiar with the market, being involved in the market for 20 years here, investing, One of the biggest challenges from the investor side that we come across is property management. And property management is really, I'm going to say, a loose-ended term, because I know a lot of people that claim to do property management, and their idea of property management is 100% hands-off. And by hands-off, I don't mean for the investor. I mean for the property manager, 100% hands-off. And what that means is it's somebody that claims that they're going to manage your property. And this is what I've come to run into myself personally a lot. So sadly, we self-manage. But within that property management, somebody wants the upfront fee. And they're going to do what I'm going to call is the bare minimum on trying to fill your unit. And obviously, while your unit's vacant, you're making no money. So the property management on turnover is difficult. Property management on finding a local source for contracting and maintenance and repairs is difficult, because everybody always wants to hire the cheapest person, which is not always the best option. And that to me has really probably been the biggest struggle as an investor and property manager myself, is just finding the right people for the right job within inside of the investment realm. So let's go over to maybe 3 of the top questions that are typically either Googled or asked personally about what's going on with the Des Moines market and their rentals. And one of the most popular ones, which I've kind of touched on a little bit in this video, is it cheaper to rent or to buy in Des Moines? And I'm going to say right now, with the way that the markets are, it's kind of an even barrier, if you would say that. Your average rents, like I said, for 2 bedrooms, roughly $1,100 a month, depending on where you're located. I would tell you, as a first-time home buyer, if that's what you're looking for, I can get you into a property buying. First-time home buyer grant programs to help with down payment assistance for probably $1,100 to $1,300 a month, depending on what you are looking for. But if we are comparing that 2-bedroom rental to a 2-bedroom home, same quality, same everything. Quality, you might be able to get a little bit more of a remodeled house on the rental side for that type of price tag. But overall, for within $100 to $200 a month, I would say you get to decide what's more affordable. Now, on the rental side, obviously maintenance, anything of that nature, that's handled by the landlord. Whereas when you are a homeowner, I recommend at least 1 month's worth of mortgage payment being set aside for maintenance repairs on your property as you go through home ownership. So if you start looking at it from that standpoint, let's say that your average payment is the $1,200 a month, setting aside an extra $100 a month for maintenance on top of the price tag difference, you might be looking at a $200 to $300 a month difference to own versus rent, and to be comfortable within that budget. Question number 2 that we get an awful lot of is, how long does it take me to find the rental that I'm looking for? And that's kind of an open-ended question. And I say that because it's going to come back down to the amenities of what you are looking for within your next rental. So location, amenities, and sometimes it comes down to, and this would go into amenities, but walkability. And by walkability, not everybody owns a car. So how far is it from work or a bus stop or local shopping? Maybe it's a coffee shop, eateries, something that I can not have to have a means of transportation, but still live my life to cut back on expenses and have everything local to me. So with everything taken into consideration, I would say to prep yourself to be even better educated, might be the term that I would use. I would tell you every bit of 30 days to find a rental that fits you. To find a rental so you have a roof over your head, I can tell you right now, you can go on Zillow, you can go on Facebook Marketplace, you could most likely find a rental in a matter of 24 hours or less. It's whether or not that rental fits your needs. But again, having a roof over your head obviously is more important than living out of your parents' basement or your car. So the final question that I want to go over that we get pretty regularly or frequently is, what is the average credit score needed to get into a rental? And I know I touched on this a little bit earlier in the video, but I wanted to dive a little bit further into it because it is one of the top questions we get. And sadly, that comes back with about a 620 credit score. Now, I do know a couple of places that'll go down to, say, a 580. But for the bulk of rentals here in the metro, unless it's a private landlord, a lot of people, a lot of commercialized rentals, they are around the 620 credit score. And that kind of correlates back to the first question that we answered, and is it cheaper to rent versus own? What it allows you to do is really it puts you in the position that you have to answer the do I want to rent or own question, because this credit score will actually put you into the category of we're either ready to move forward with a purchase as well, but you're so close. If you need down payment assistance, I've got to get you to a 640 99.9% of the time in order to qualify you for down payment assistance in the state of Iowa. Give a little plug to the Iowa Finance Authority here, partnered with them for many years, helping tons of people every year with down payment assistance. But yeah, I mean, the average credit score, if I can get you to a 640, you can look at buying. And what does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you the freedom to say, hey, my rent doesn't necessarily need to go up every year. Or, hey, I want to get a pet and I don't want to pay an additional fee. Or, hey, I want to decide what color my walls are going to be in my bedroom and not have any recourse for I painted these because you didn't want them painted type of situation. So realistically, answering all these questions together, it is truly a togethersome with question 1 and question 3 is, do I want to rent or do I want to buy? And the credit scores kind of go hand in hand with one another, that most landlords are going to require the same credit score it would take you to buy a house. So what are my predictions moving forward for 2026? With inside the rental market, I'm going to predict that you're still going to have an abundance for a couple of years of affordable commercialized rentals. I say this because there's supposed to be a water park going in 2026 that is also supposed to be community based. So it's going to have shopping as well as apartment buildings on top of everything. That will drive the commercialized side of things. Now, if we look at, I want to rent a single family home. Sadly, during COVID, a lot of landlords sold off a lot of their portfolio because it was a prime time to sell. They got very good gains on those properties, and you know, like everywhere across the country or most places across the country during COVID, everything was selling for top dollar and extremely quick, and it was a bidding war a bunch of the time. So our individual rentals, as far as single family homes, that number is lagging behind very heavily as far as vacancies, occupancy, actually just availability, period. But my prediction is that market's still going to stay relatively strong, single family houses, because it just takes time for, you know, investors to build that up. And secondly, on the commercialized side, I think you're going to have that little bit of a cushion as things get built. But also remember that when people buy new or new is being constructed, that comes back to how easy is it for you to get in. Is that one of those that are very highly sought after buildings because everything's new, so no maintenance, it's clean. Usually it's in very desirable locations, whether they've torn something down in the downtown area, or in this case, that water park. It's going to be located out in West Des Moines, and it's going to be within 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes of some of the major shopping and eateries out there. So that's my prediction kind of moving forward, is the abundance is going to stay there on the commercialized side of things for rentals. Now I want to take the chance to invite you to drop a comment down below about any questions you might have in regards to the rental market, any rentals in the location, comments. Feel free to visit my website. And as always, if you would please like, subscribe, and click the little bell to turn on those notifications so that way you get the most up-to-date information on the housing market as well as the rental market for the Des Moines, Iowa Metro.